Well, hello everyone. I am live. Uh, I know I said I wasn't going to be live tonight. However, I foo-fooed on the US election, which of course is always on a Tuesday, not on a Wednesday. Should have known that. And so I've backtracked and decided yesterday, or the day before yesterday, either Monday, Tuesday, now I can't remember, that I would have a um, I'd have a live tonight. And again, normally I wasn't going to have one, but I made a mistake on our last video. So I am here tonight, this evening, um, and we are going to talk about how I break down ideas, some of the strategies and methods by which I do that, some of which won't be terribly complicated. But I really wanted to get into that because a lot of people ask me over, the years and so forth. They ask me how I break down ideas, why I like to break down ideas like this, and we're going to get into that a little later. Of course, you know, might as well get the pink elephant in the room. I would say pink elephant. I know it's elephant in the room. There was the election in the United States yesterday. I just want to say I'm happy for the people that are happy with the results, and I am sad for the people who are sad for the results. I certainly have my own opinions, but as I always like to say here, I don't want to alienate anybody, especially when it comes to politics, because we're all friends here. And I believe that having friends across the political spectrum, as long as they are not engaged in any kind of violence or discrimination or so forth, then I think it's okay. I think it's okay to have friends and so forth that just don't agree on certain political and economic issues, even social issues. But if we can, see past some of those things and find common ground, then I think that's the ultimate message. But I did want to mention a very interesting fact. And before I do that, hey Brian, good to see you, Brian. I know I just mentioned the election yesterday. Uh, how are you, Brian? Irish Mart. Good, nice new pic, by the way. Good picture. Um, how are you? Thanks for being here. Thanks for supporting me as always, Irish Mart. I think I'm going to make a list of 12 apostles, but I'm going to call them Mark apostles. And I think Irish is going to be on one of my list of Mark apostles. Definitely, some of the exalted few chosen is Irish on that list. You won't be listed from 1 to 12. That would be too elitist of me. But instead, you will be Mark Postles. Well, good evening to you, sir, and I hope everything went okay yesterday for you. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm happy if you're happy. I'm not happy if you're not happy. So it's one of those things where, what can I say? But one interesting thing, though, is I'm sure some of you might have heard it if you been following some of the media. Trump has now won two consecutive, non-consecutive, I should say, terms. And the last time that happened was all the way back in the 1880s with Grover Cleveland. And so I have some just interesting, whether or not, you're a fan or not a fan, this is just an interesting fact that I wanted to share. So, he's now the second president to win two non-consecutive terms. And so, who was Grover Cleveland? Of course, Grover Cleveland was a Democratic president. He first became the president after defeating Chester A. Arthur in the 1884 presidential election in the U.S. And he served his first term as president from 1885 until 1889. He then lost the election to Benjamin Harrison in 1888. However, 4 years later, Grover Cleveland won the 1892, excuse me, election, defeating Benjamin Harrison, and he would serve as president from 1893 to 1897. So we are living in the second time that that has happened in US history, which I think is very interesting. So regardless of our opinions, regardless of our beliefs, that is an interesting fact. So the last time that happened where a president won a term, lost a term, then won again was Grover Cleveland. Yeah, one day at a time. I understand what you're saying, Brian. Absolutely. And Peter's here. Peter helped us last week with some American civics. Glad that you're here, Peter. That's amazing. Thank you so much. Hope everything was okay yesterday in California. Um, you know, and I was just going over some interesting facts about how now Trump is the second president to win two non-consecutive terms, which again is just an interesting fact. Um, and I'll say it, said it twice before, but I'll say it again. Anyone out here is happy from the elections. I'm happy for you. If anyone is not happy, then I'm not happy for you either. So I'm happy if you're happy. I'm sad if you're sad. And then yes, yes, Brian. Yeah, all this reminds me of the Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. I'm tired of living in interesting times. Yeah, I know. What about boring times that nothing happens, right? Of course, yeah, in California, like, come on, it's 55 electoral points and it's always Democratic. So, I understand. It's the same with being a Democrat in, Texas or something. So, or in a red state that's like, never gone blue a day in its life. So I get it. I get it. Um, or, and so forth. So it stinks for the people it stinks for. And I understand. And if you feel like venting, don't worry. If you don't want to do it here, you can do it elsewhere. Venting is good. Oh, Arkansas. I mean, the thing though is Arkansas, of course, had Bill Clinton. So at least at one point, it was at least for governor. Clinton was a Democrat, and then I don't know. You can tell me, Brian. I don't know how long you've lived in Arkansas, but I'm assuming that when Clinton won in what is it, 92 and 96, he probably took Arkansas, maybe. But yeah, how would you equate the new media today after the election? Give me a second on that one. I love my state, not so much the state party. Agreed. It was interesting, right? So if we're going to do a small media analysis before we get into today's topic, I would say that the polling is one of those things that has to kind of stop. I mean, you can't stop polling, but the amount of like clickbaity type articles that um, were on the polling, the polling, the polling. It's now because of that idea of the increased consumption and increased, you know, uh, uh, totality of news that we're being inundated with all the time. The polling, the polling, the polling, but like the polling doesn't matter. And so the amount of media time and airspace and so forth, and especially on the internet, going over analysis of polls and pollsters, it's like, guys, like we gotta just wait to the election. And so again, Harris was leading in the polls. Um, People were pretty much, if you went by the polls, you would have been expecting Harris to win last night. And I think she had 200 whatever, electoral college votes. She lost the electoral college. She lost the popular vote and so forth. So it's like people get inundated and then they give some false hope. And so I heard that the voter turnout was not as great last night. And I heard, and Harris lost the popular vote by 4 million votes, and a lot of people didn't vote last night. I got this statistic, and I don't know if this is true. Someone can correct me on it, but there was something like 18 million adults or something had absentee ballots, or they had ballots where they didn't fill out, or they didn't something with 18 million, and I can't figure out what that is. I just heard 18 million people, so I don't know if that's who didn't show up to vote or who voted either not for Harris or Trump or whatever. Anyway, I don't really know. I just again I glanced at it. But if that's the case, especially what the voter turnout was, I think people are just getting sick of it, and they're getting sick and tired of being told that it's the most important election ever, because they've been saying that all the time. As I said last week, the most important election is the election you're voting in because it is important. It's not the most important ever, and the media just makes people sick of it. Like it's always the most important election of your life. It's all, and then the next one, and the next one, and after a while, a lot of people my age, we're now in our 30s and 40s. Like the most important election we were told was the one in 2000, then the one in 2004, then the one in 2008, then the one in 2012, then 16, then it's like just every important election is important. Let's stop with it, you know. In the early Republicans, yeah, many left California for Texas. Okay, well, that's what's happening now. There's a lot of comedians and a lot of tech bros that are moving from Silicon Valley and South and LA and are moving to Austin. But most of them are Republicans, so it doesn't swing Texas that much. And even for California, it's probably making it, you know, more blue. Lived in Texas, okay, most of my life. So yeah, you could remind me if it was in 92, 96, if Clinton won Arkansas. That would be interesting. Yeah, I don't know how to pay attention. It's over and done with. Exactly. But I'm just saying, like, the amount of articles and the amount of just exhaustion that people have felt over the past. That's another thing, that the United States elections go on for so long. I think it's like, was it a year? Like, it's actually incredibly long, like, most of the time, like, in Canada and most, it's in and out within a few months, like, the prime minister will call an election. We have elections normally in November, but they can be called anytime, but it's not like this grueling, almost year-long process of or more in some cases, and then the primaries, it's so exhausting for people that, like, I don't know about you, but the last couple weeks, they blew by so fast because it's like, "Let's just get to today and over with," and now it's just over with, and now we're moving on, you know? But anywho, yeah, I'm surprised. I thought most people voted. What I'm noticing, and our American friends here, if can say that this sort of um, confirm this or not. Uh, Yeah, Clinton took Arkansas in the '90s, but the 2000s it went red. Yeah, lots of reasons. Yeah. So a lot of people stayed home, I think, who were very left wing because like progressive voters and stuff, and even those who are further left because of and I don't want to, bring up an issue to get too much involved in because I also have a personal unfortunately, I have a personal connection to this place and to this conflict. But with the Israel Gaza war, so a lot of very left wing voters in the United States didn't vote for the Democrats because they thought it would just be more of the same. The Jewish American vote went mostly to Trump. And I also heard that Latino votes, Muslim American Arab votes, and even immigrant votes went to Trump. And then Trump won men under 30, but the female vote of all across all ages went to Harris. So it's very, very interesting. And that's really all we can say for the next 4 years. So, you know, we'll have to look at things like prices of goods if Trump enacts his tariff plan. The Supreme Court is going to be very interesting, and so on. So I don't know. I know that a lot of my American friends, because I have a lot of American friends who live in Los Angeles, well, they're not happy. But again, I have some family in Florida who are very happy. So who knows? But yeah, so that's been on for 15 minutes. And again, interesting. I will. That's the most. That's the. That's the word of the I don't know, what do you wanna call it? The year, the month, the day is interesting. So, regardless of what happens, again, I'm happy if you're happy, I'm sad if you're sad, but, one day at a time, and hopefully will be an election in 4 years. I think there will be an election in 4 years, and that time the Democratic Party will have to really do some soul searching, and let's hope they can come up with a better candidate. That's all you can do. And if you're Republicans, I don't think Trump can run again. So then they'll have to come up with another person, and so on and so on. So 2028 will then be touted as the most important election. Anywho, so Ryan says, "Yep, I hope it's not going to be too painful. Yeah, as a veteran, I'm worried about the issues that affect my healthcare and benefits. Yeah, and I would be too, because I know the VA health system is not great, which I think is disgusting. I think um, I'm always reminded, Brian, of the movie. I know it's with Tom Cruise, but Born on the Fourth of July. I'm not saying the VA is like that, but I know that uh, the VA kind of was like that, and that really opened my eyes to some of the things. Like it was so hard for the VA to take care of soldiers that came back, especially from different wars like Vietnam. They're so underfunded and so forth. So I'm hoping in Arkansas, where you are, you have good access to VAs and insurance and so forth. And I hope it's okay. I do know some people in Los Angeles who access in Westwood. They have a big VA clinic, and it's like iffy. It's not the best, and you have to wait a long time to see a dentist and whatever. But at least they have it there. Then the beauty of married democracy is that change doesn't happen rapidly, regardless of who is in charge. It's great for my father, but you have to make an appointment for everything. Yeah, and their free housing aids. Yep, yep. So I hope so. So let me know. I'll start some comments, and we can go back afterwards. Again, we'll talk about social systems and stuff all day, which I'm always happy to talk about because I'm fairly new to it. Um, but I did want to get into the topic at hand, which of course is how I break down ideas. I also want to say too that, as I mentioned last time on Saturday, which we did our the PowerPoint on the Twilight Zone. I want to look at some analytics here for y'all because it's been an interesting couple of weeks since I've been doing tags. I've been putting tags into my videos. So the Twilight Zone episode from Saturday has 584 views, and my one last week, or the week before last, I should say, on Russian minorities from 10 days ago, has 594 views. So it doesn't sound like much, but I'm happy that people are definitely clicking and checking it out. I have well, I can't remember how many views I have, but it's well over 2,000, over 2,500 views, and so forth. So I'm very happy with all of this stuff. In addition, please, as a reminder, and I'll remind you afterwards, that I'm not going to be having a stream on this Saturday, which is the 9th, I believe, and then I won't be having streams next week on the 13th to the 16th. So we will reconvene 2 weeks from today on the 20th. I'll put up a poll. And then on the 23rd, of November, we will have a PowerPoint on the 1848 revolution and the rise of nationalism in Europe. I'll again get into that later. But yeah, just wanted to sort of say that for various reasons. One reason is I wanted to make a couple of PowerPoints before the end of the year, and then after that, I'm kind of all caught up with my PowerPoints, and I'm thinking of maybe doing on Saturday doing more of a lecture base, and I'll bring in some visuals or PowerPoints when I can, because even though it's not difficult to make PowerPoints, it is harder to edit because I have to sit with them for a little while, so it takes a little while. Plus, in that, I've got stuff with my thesis, I've got stuff with I'm learning Spanish and all this kind of thing. So I may switch formats just a hair, but it will still be the same show. We'll still be on 2 days a week. Okay, so We're going to start off now, getting into the topic of how I break down ideas. And the first thing that you should know about this is a part of my strategies and a part of my method is something that I very, very interestingly learned in Scientology. To me, Scientology was not all negative, wasn't 100% negative, but it was so overwhelmingly negative, okay, it's close to 100%, but it wasn't 100%, that even though they did teach me some stuff, very little of those things were actually valid that I continue to use today. Now, when I say what my breaking down system is, please note that this is not Scientology tech. I'm just saying there are some small nuggets of things that I learned which will become apparent as I go on. I'm also not encouraging anybody, unless you want to, learn what is called study tech or investigation tech, which is where nuggets of what I do come from. But beyond that, I think Scientology is pretty useless and very subjective. And so, overall, just to get these nuggets and these kernels out of the pot, so to speak, it doesn't outweigh the negatives of Scientology, which is why I'm no longer a member. So the first thing I like to do is let's say, okay, we okay, let's look at political concepts. Now this could also look for philosophy, for religion and so forth, but let's just take a political concept, okay, like democracy. So when I say the word democracy, right? I don't know what the another person, like if I'm trying to communicate to a group or to an individual, I don't know what the other person thinks about democracy. They could believe it's the greatest thing, God's gift to our planet, or they could think that it's completely and utterly evil, right? It's the same goes for liberalism, conservatism, socialism, capitalism, etc. So because I don't know what the other person thinks, then we always have to take a step back. And so this is one nugget of Scientology that is very interesting, which is we got to define the word. Now, I'm not interested about misunderstood words and all that bullshit that you learn in study tech, but I'm more interested in like we have to be on the same page because if we take something like democracy, some people will think that again, it's like an amazing system, an amazing thing. And other people will say, no, it just leads to bureaucracy. People are stupid. They don't know what they want. Okay. If we take something like an economic system, again, like socialism, right? If the person I'm trying to communicate the different points and the different variations of socialism, but they only are thinking of Stalin and famines and, gulags, but I'm just trying to break down the idea into the different parts, then we need to be on common ground. Same thing with capitalism. Capitalism sometimes is considered to be dog eat dog competitive. People will quote Milton Friedman, Ayn Rand, selfishness, greed. Greed is good for lack of a better term, to quote Gordon Gekko. But if I'm someone who believes in what's called social democracy, and I read people like Joseph Stiglitz, and I like the Nordic models, which is high tax and lots of redistribution, which is a capitalist system, then we have to be on the same page. And that's number one. So number one is we start with definitions. We have to start with definitions. And even if we accept that beyond that definition of that one word, there are what are called colloquialisms, which are unofficial definitions by which people hold, like the word cult is another one. Okay. Cult means culture, but it can also mean Scientology. It could also mean Heaven's Gate. But if I'm just trying to communicate that with you, we need to be on the same page. So that's just number one. That's the most basic thing that I think everyone can probably get on board with. I'm sure that many of you do this too. Again, I don't think my method is special. It's honest, like honestly, I don't think it is. I just think that how I communicate based on, where I grew up, the people I grew up with, the education I had, plus for better or for worse, Scientology made me kind of appreciate and slow down where if I say a word, okay, and people are attacking it, let's just break it down and find out what the root of that word is. Some people call this semantics, but I think it's actually the good part of semantics. It's like if you've ever read, and we had to read, or at least I did, read Alfred Korzybski, who Hubbard quotes as the founder of semantics. This is the line of thinking that he's doing rather than just arguing minutiae about certain things. So if you want to argue semantics with me, by the way, I will argue semantics with you all day long, even if it's the minutia stuff that people don't like. But there really is a method by which these things we have to be on the same page. So that's number one. Okay. So if we're looking at democracy, what I'm going to do, because I think this is a good relevant topic, is I'm simply going to go to one of the best dictionaries, which is Merriam-Webster. You could use any other dictionary. I don't like dictionary.com because technically that's not a dictionary, it's just a .com. But regardless, even if you use that, that's okay, right? And we're going to look up what the word democracy means. So democracy has a couple different definitions. I'm just going to go very briefly on what these are. Number one is democracy is a government by the people, rule of the majority. 1A says a form of government in which people elect representatives to make decisions, policies, laws, etc., according to law. 1B, a form of government in which the people vote directly against or in favor of decisions, policies, laws, etc. Number two, a country, state, etc., whose form of government is democracy, a political unit that has a democratic government, and on and on and on. Okay, so what are we getting out of this, right? We've got some commonalities here. We're getting ruled by the people, voting, and so forth. All right. So even if somebody loves democracy, even if somebody hates democracy, we all kind of have to get on board with that idea that voting is very important. We vote for representatives. Representatives will go into higher courts, how the House, the Senate, the House of Commons, whatever else, national assemblies, federal assemblies, state and provincial assemblies, and they will, because we represent them, they are the ones that we give the power to change laws and so forth. Okay, we have elections and whatnot. So to me, even if somebody hates democracy, they can still get on board with that. So that's the first thing that I will do. So the first thing you do is you just define the word so all parties can get on board. Okay. If they still have their feelings, their opinions, because we're now separating the opinion from the definition. So you can hate or love something, or you can feel complete ambivalence to something and apathy for something, but then you can still acknowledge that words do exist and have meaning. Okay. So once that happens, and that can take some time because there's a lot of definitions. I said I just read two of them. So, we get those ideas. Okay. So we're going to accept that democracy is about voting, it's about elective representatives. We're going to talk about voting in people so they can change laws or protect laws and policies and so forth. Okay. Let's say we all have that together. We're all on board with that. The second thing I like to do is look at different types because this is what I find with a lot of people is to avoid the straw man and to avoid overgeneralities. Because if I say I love X and you say, oh, well, you love X, that must mean you hate Y. Why do you hate Y? What did Y do to you? That's a straw man fallacy, right? So instead of assuming what a word means, we have to all get on board. Now, in the types of ideas, this is where we're going to come into a lot of different ideas and a lot of different systems and a lot of different ideologies and a lot of different values and so forth. So just by example, if we're looking at politics, if somebody says they're liberal, I usually say, well, what type? Somebody says they're conservative, what type? They're a socialist, a capitalist, a communist, a Marxist, a monarchist, heaven forbid, a fascist, you know, a libertarian, um, whatever. What type? And usually people will associate their own values based on something they've read, based on a class they took at college or university, based on someone they watch on YouTube or whatever. So someone might say, you know what, I'm a social democrat. Okay, well, what type of social democrat? Oh, well, I kind of like the Nordic model. Well, why do you like the Nordic model? Okay, because I have a friend from Sweden, and he taught, they taught me about the Nordic model, so I like that. Okay, cool. Okay, well, that's a very specific type. Okay, and that's not to, hammer down. Okay, um, anybody's ideas. That's just trying to get to the root of it. And so, after getting to the root of that and thinking, well, what type are you? We have different types of democracy, right? And here's just some of them. We have direct democracy or pure democracy. We talked about that last time. Direct democracy, popular democracy is usually the idea that people get to vote on a lot of different things, usually like proclamations or referendums, and there's a consistent flow. So, like, really, it's not necessarily representative. So, if you can imagine living in a society where the citizenship is asked whether or not they want a tax increase or a tax decrease. That's direct democracy. There are people who like direct democracy. There are people who don't like direct democracy, right? When we get into the next type, we have representative democracies, as I mentioned before. We have a lot of different types of them. So I'm just going to go over a few of them and to give you kind of and then I'll give kind of a basis. But there is a liberal democracy, which is a representative democracy with rule of law, protection of individual liberties and rights, and limitations on the power of elected representatives. There's also illiberal democracy, which is a representative democracy with weak or no limits on power of the elected representatives to rule as they please. There also are parliamentary democracies that we mentioned before, something called the Westminster model. There's presidential democracies, including the Jacksonian, and so on and so on. Dominant party systems, two party systems, multi party systems. I'm not going to get into all of them, but if you saw some of my previous, um, you know, PowerPoints and things like this I had one that I did with Doug, may he rest in peace, Doug Scott Kramer, and then the Nerdy Bunch on breaking down the different theological stances. So, what is theism? What is deism? And so forth. If we look at the ones that I did on non theism, what's atheism? What's agnosticism? What's humanism? Those are the types of things that I like to do. We all have this, be set on an idea. And so we break it down. So that's another thing, right? We have to know what type of something the person is actually doing. Because otherwise, as I mentioned before, we get into straw man fallacies. So a lot of people, for example, when we talk about democracy, a lot of people will look at democracy and democracies, okay? And if you're an authoritarian, you're going to see democracy as weak. You're going to see the people being incompetent, not being able to make those decisions. You need, according to the authoritarian, someone on top to make the decisions for the people. Okay. Now, I don't agree with that. Most people don't agree with that. We might prefer a representative democracy, but at least that's the arguments against it. So when you're arguing with someone who might have that position, you need to figure out what they believe in, and so forth. And so, how do you break down ideas? You ask for the definition, you get everyone on board with that definition to some extent, even though they can still have their feelings. And then we got to look for the types because then you, let's say you're talking one on one with someone and you're finding yourself to be the polar opposite of them politically or whatever, you have to figure out what are the arguments that they're making as you don't want to straw man. So again, I'm sitting across from someone, let's just say, and we're trying to have a debate. Back in the day, including Budapest, Vienna, Berlin, and so forth, they used to have coffee houses. And this is something I kind of wish they would bring back. In a coffee house, you would have individual people, mostly men, unfortunately, but later on, women would join as well. And there would be like a communist on one table, and they would have a cup of coffee. And you could go up to the communist guy, sit down, and have a talk with them, or a liberal, or a nationalist, or whatever. You know what I mean? Can you imagine doing that today? I can't. I think it would just be straw man and ad hominems. You'd have some conservative person sit down next to the communist and say, "You want people to die. You want people to starve to death. You want this and you want that." And the person's saying, "No, they don't." I can imagine it. If someone is like a conservative or a libertarian and they're saying, "Well, you want to lower taxes. You don't want government." And I think that more actual contact, looking at people in the eyes and talking to them will get rid of that. So once we've discovered, okay, what these various types are, once we acknowledge that there are various types of ideologies, that there are various types of democracies and systems of government and whatever, religions, theological stances. The other thing is we have to get rid of what's called a false dichotomy. So one of the reasons I like doing this is not only are we trying to get rid of straw man fallacies by not accusing people of the most horrendous thing and misrepresenting their arguments and making arguments against positions that the other person doesn't take, but to also get through and cut through false dichotomies. And a false dichotomy is very simply when you present a person in a thought experiment or a hypothetical of two extreme scenarios, and you say, like, okay, either you are a socialist who wants people to die and starve to death, or you're a capitalist who wants people to live free. What? Either you're a capitalist who wants people to die and starve to death and go bankrupt because of medical bills, or you're a socialist and you're the most wonderful human being and you love people. It's like, I can't stand this kind of stuff. So, what I always like to do is also present the third option. And this is why I'm trying to get into the idea very specifically again, okay, of types. Because once we introduce types, once we get into the types, we will realize that there's not just two types of something. So, if I said to someone, "Do you believe in?" It's a yes or no question. But in my opinion, saying yes or no doesn't give me an identity. The question should be, what do you believe about something? So instead of going up to a socialist and saying, "Do you believe in the government?" And they say yes, say, "Well, you're obviously a socialist." Okay, what does that mean? If you say, "What do you believe about socialism? What do you believe about your liberalism, your capitalism, your religion?" There's more dialogue. So these are the little things that I've learned over the past few years that Scientology planted, I wouldn't say planted seeds because obviously that's a Socratic method thing, but they definitely added some, some kernels at the beginning. Another thing is to look at, as I have again mentioned before, because a couple weeks ago we did the three sources of information. I have a journalism background. And I've also taken philosophy courses. So asking questions is something that I like to do. And if you're in this kind of scenario where you like to break down ideas, you like to learn from people, I'm of the mood right now where I don't want to meet someone who's a potential friend or whatever, and because they call themselves something, they use a label, I'm going to automatically judge that person for better or for worse because I have political ideas and I've met people who share the same political ideas with me as far as label wise. I don't like them anymore. Then some people who have the opposite, and I like them better. So I don't want to get into that tribalism of, well, you say you're the same as me, therefore you're just as good as me. And so part of that is really trying to break down and finding out what people are. And so this idea of cutting back on the false dichotomy is to understand that regardless, we very much live in a complicated, intellectual playground. And because someone uses single word, whether that is a Christian word, or I should say a religious word, pardon me. I mean, listen, in America, sometimes to call yourself a Christian, depending on where you are, you might be praised, and then they find out that, you're part of a certain church or denomination, and then you're skirted away. But if you're an atheist, for example, in America, that can be the worst thing in some areas in the Bible Belt. But again, you can still be a good person. And so this is why when I try to break down, some of these ideas, I'm trying to strip away the labels, the superficiality. What do I think doesn't matter? It's what the other person thinks that matters more. And so some of the questions you could ask is to avoid yes or no questions. So, do you believe in? Yes or no? That doesn't work. What do you think of this topic? So somebody says, okay, they're conservative. Instead of saying, well, do you believe in Trump? Yes or no? You could say, what do you believe about your conservatism? How would you define your conservatism? Now, obviously, there might be some different aspects on, like, is the person sort of a social conservative? What do they think about the LGBTQ community and so forth? Let me put that away. Sorry, let me start that, Pete. And yeah, because you're right about that. Um, you know what I mean? Like, let me figure out what do you, and then you can have disagreements, but instead of flying off the handle about these issues, it's better to say, like, hey, okay, if someone is a very socially conservative and they don't like gay people, they don't like the trans, okay? Why? Do you know anybody? Like, let's just look at, okay, maybe they're quoting the Bible, maybe they're not, right? Try to get to the roots of these things. Don't lose your cool, even though I understand that a lot of these things are sensitive issues. Don't lose your cool and ask. And then if you can't penetrate their shields, then there's only so much you can do, because the other thing is you are not in charge of their beliefs or changing their minds. And so when we look at stuff like this past election, people on both sides, you know, were probably very eager to sway people to their side. But that doesn't work because everyone's side has faults. And so you kind of have to be, I hate the word humble. I used to say, I would say sometimes if somebody says something about Mark, you're not being humble. The joke is, what are you talking about? I'm the most humble person you'll ever meet in your life. People are always around me telling how humble I am. I'm so humble. Anyway, but you have to be like that. You have to just go, okay, well, I'm not in control of that person's, I'm going to plant those seeds of doubt. I'm going to use the Socratic method. I'm going to say, hey, maybe you should think about it this way, or ever thought about it that way, or whatever, and plant those seeds of doubt. So to really go back and just sort of sum up everything is the very, very first thing that I like to do when I break down ideas, and you can look at this from my um, previous content, is I try to throw up, not vomit, but I try to throw up on screen, not vomit, or put up, I should say, on screen. And in my PowerPoints, I usually like to put up a definition and be like, okay, this is where we're going to start. So this is the definition, okay, of this word. So when we talked about theological stances, the term theism doesn't just mean a belief in God. It actually means a belief in a very specific kind of God called the personal God. And then we can break down those characteristics, and so forth. So, colloquially speaking, okay, fine, right? I'm not in charge of how other people use the word. And there's some people that say, if you say, do you believe in God? Yes, you're automatically a theist, or no, you're automatically an atheist. I don't subscribe to that line of thinking only because I think that it is better handled when we look at what the definition is. But again, I'm not in charge of that. So when people ask me that question, I don't usually answer because, I don't like that line of questioning. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't have an answer. It doesn't mean I don't like the person. It just means I think I like more. I like more in depth kind of questions. And so it's always very strange for me in that way. And again, I know a lot of people will say you're arguing semantics, but I'm actually applying applied semantics, and people sometimes find that annoying as well. But we have to start with that definition. We all have to, when I'm doing a PowerPoint, we got to all get on the same level. And if somebody then, can't get on the same level because they don't agree with me or they don't think that I have the right perspective, okay, that's fine too, right? That's okay because I'm not in charge of the other person or what they think. But once we get that definition, we have to acknowledge on what the actual definition means, which means we can share our own ideas, our thoughts, our perspectives. We can add those colloquialisms and those changes that happen to words because words are not always set in stone. Okay. It's not like 1984. I don't like that, where an institution changes the meaning of words in order to, you know, manipulate language. But words do evolve. I mean, the word gay, I mentioned that earlier, 60, 70 years ago just meant happy. Now it means, homosexual or part of the LGBTQ community, right? That's not what the word is supposed to mean. It's supposed to mean happy, but it became that way. And there's plenty of examples of those as well, and so on. Okay. So we have to also acknowledge that. Once we acknowledge those things, once we get to the root, what the word means, how it's used, all the colloquialisms that are involved, we have to say there are types. And specifically, when we're talking about philosophy, religion, theologies, uh, spirituality, politics, especially political systems, societies, and so forth. If there's more than one type of a thing, then to me it's good to look at the what are they? And then what I'm hoping I'm doing here is presenting people that there are options, because what you will do, my viewer, is what I do as well, which is when I'm listening to a lecture or I'm listening to, people breaking down ideas, is we think back to our lives, which means a lot of us grew up in a different, country. We all grew up in, maybe we all speak English, but maybe English is our second, third, fourth language. We might have grown up in different nations, in different communities, in different religions, and we have what are called our personal experiences. And so we will take what we know from our lives, which is subjective, and we will look at those types, and through our own intuition or through our gut or through reasoning, I don't know, we will tend to latch on and be like, huh, okay, well, you broke down this political idea, And as I'm looking around in my head, I'm thinking, oh, that makes more sense than the other thing. And again, I'm not in control of that either. That's you. So that's why I even like to talk about stuff that I don't agree with and not tell you whether or not I agree with or not. Okay. So when I presented the theological and non-theological stances, there are certain things that I like and don't like in those ones, but who cares? I want you to make up your own mind. And what I could do, and maybe what I will do now that I'm thinking about it, is to break down different types of like liberalism, conservatism, capitalism, socialism, libertarianism. Maybe I'll even actually do that because then that way I can make more PowerPoints. And then all of y'all, all my followers can kind of, subscribers can look at that and be like, oh, okay, well, this definition is good and this definition doesn't make much sense, but this definition and so forth. And again, all I'm doing is presenting different things. And that's really it. I mean, again, this is no secret. What started with some mundane, benign Scientology tech, okay, which is like the 1% or less that actually works, evolved into a different analytical style that I like to do, which is based on the education I've had with philosophy, looking analytically, breaking things down, maybe some skepticism, but also mostly like, you know, um, from my journalism background. And I've just melded it, which we all do, right? So this is a multifaceted, multi educational, multi interdisciplinary type study because I studied broadcasting, I studied broadcast journalism, I studied radio, TV broadcasting, film, script writing, journalism, news writing, print journalism, philosophy of religion, and now history and history of literature, history of um, God, the Jewish community in Eastern Europe and so forth. So all of the things that make up my experiences are involved in this as well, and I just like to share these informations. And I will say, although as far as websites are concerned, philosophybasics.com is amazing for philosophy. And I know that it's not always reliable as Wikipedia, but what Wikipedia and other encyclopedias like Encyclopedia Britannica do is they will say, okay, liberalism, conservatism, whatever the topic is, they give you a pretty good definition, not just a couple words. They give you a good encyclopedic definition, which tends to go into more detail, and then they break down all the different types as well. So it's almost like an encyclopedic type of thinking, which I think is also missing in our society today because a lot of it is just quick fix. I don't know how many people here have children or grandchildren or whatever that might be under 30, under 25, but like TikToks are like what, 30-second videos, 10-second videos. Like, people's attention spans are not as vibrant as they used to be, for lack of a better word. Um, but it's more like, okay, I'm looking at a video, and if it doesn't give me what I want within 10 to 20 seconds, and it doesn't say, get me hyped up to do something or whatever, people don't have the time. So I hope at least, and I know that I do have a lot of my subscribers and people here do like this type of analytical breaking down of things in philosophical way. But again, it's all because of all the things that I've learned over the years. And so with that, I'm going to go to the start questions. Uh, Poet says the VA system works well for me. The biggest problem is living out where I do not having a car. Yeah. Okay. Well, I hope everything goes okay with you, Brian. I hope that you're all right. Gonna take a nap. I'll keep playing on mute for the rest of the replay. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Okay. From a poet. How far are you from Little Rock? Okay. Um, Yeah, open-ended questions. I also like presenting hypotheticals and thought experiments. I find work. And again, if somebody is just too like us versus them and too black and white, and it's all just one or nothing, you sometimes just have to walk away. But I always have much better conversations with really trying to get at why and what a person and how a person thinks. And there are some cultures, like in Canada, I don't know why, people find it very rude. But, like, for me, the intention is not rude. I'm just trying to figure out, like, someone says there's something, why? Why are you that thing? I just wanna know. And I guess maybe depending on culture and cultural politeness and stuff, we find it rude, and that's just the way it is. So, I find my American friends, a lot of my European friends are different. Not to say Canadians won't do this, but there are certain people that are very put off by it. Although I guess I could say that about everyone anyway. Um, oh, damn, I'm late for this. Don't worry, Powerline. Good to see you. Very, very good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Taking interpersonal communication course, the topic of how you phrase a question. Yes. I know you is one of those things. I say it all the time. You should do this. You should do this. It should be I. I am trying to work on that. It's hard. It's so hard. It's like saying guys, like you guys is so hard. I'm trying to say you all or everybody to change because we kind of have a bit of a change of language. So I would do this or I should do that or whatever, rather than you do this, you do that. And then of course, yeah, guys, you guys should just be you all or everyone. So I'm trying. I might make mistakes. Please forgive me on that if anyone's out there. I'm gonna make my shorts 37 seconds, the average YouTube. Yeah, I'm gonna start making shorts, by the way. Um, Soon, I hope, and so it's the nature of the beast, don't worry about it. I understand, you know what I mean? I also, by the way, like shorts too. I just don't find that sometimes I can make things short. Like, to me, it's like, I've always been that person who it's like, "Okay, you have a minute to talk, and I'll talk for 10," you know? That's just how I am. "Sorry I'm so late, do not worry about it, Shell. Hope everything's good with you. Hope everything was great." Sorry. Okay. Um, so yeah, how can we accomplish this task? Yeah, it's tough. Practice. Practice makes perfect. I'm trying to be consciously or whatever of not saying certain things just because they're outdated. Which for certain things, I mean, listen, guys, I grew up in the night, guys. Oi, listen, everybody. I grew up in the 90s and I used to call my friends words we can't say anymore to my friends. And I've stopped using those words, so I should be stopped using the word guys and the word you should stop. You should this. But it's tough. I mean, it's hard. So there you go. I slipped in a guys. Anyway, I'm learning from my mistakes. I'm not perfect. I just wanted to say again, for those that have just joined us, this was sort of a I was going to take today off because I thought the election was today. It was yesterday. That was my mistake. But I will be taking off Saturday, which is the 9th, this upcoming Saturday. And next week, the 13th and the 16th, there will be no shows for me to get caught up on PowerPoints, which I'm going to do on the 23rd of November. So we will have our next show in 2 weeks' time on the 20th. I will put up a poll and we will vote for whichever you want to see. You could also leave comments. You can, leave a comment here on the chat. You can leave a comment afterwards on the replay, whatever you'd like, if you want me to talk about certain things. So on the 20th, we'll do our regular what we're doing now. We'll pick a topic, we'll do some discussion on that. And then on the 23rd, I'm going to do a PowerPoint on the 1848 revolution in Europe. And it's going to be a pretty good one, a pretty big one I've been wanting to do for a while. So that will be on a history topic. After that, in December, I'm going to do a couple of maybe two or three because we have the holidays. So I'll do another two or three Saturday PowerPoints. And then what I could do is, I might, as I mentioned, I might or might not, um, uh, let's see, might or might not change formats just a little to do lectures rather than PowerPoints, but who knows? If I get PowerPoints done, I get them done. And what else did I want to say? I guess nothing too much else. Analytics are doing pretty good on the channel. I really thank everyone for being here. I hope this was informative. Again, this is just sort of off the cuff, so I didn't really have anything planned as far as going through, but I just think breaking down ideas, which I think anyone can do, it's not a mystery. I'm not the only one who can do it. It's just a little analytical. It's a really nice thing. And always remember that there are different types, and we shouldn't assume that because someone uses a word, it means they are of a specific type, especially when there's multiple types. And that's really the basis of why I like to do what I do. This will not happen, Peter. Sorry, not at all. Good thing you're joking. It will not happen. You don't want to see what's under my sweater or under my shirt. This is an old Navy track shirt, which I brought from home. Uh, and you know what? The world is better. The world is better for not wanting to see what's under this. I am not an athletic man, that's for sure. If I had big muscles and the six pack, maybe, but that's just not going to happen. But anyway, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who is watching this live and on the replay. Please don't forget to like this video if you haven't already. And please subscribe to my channel. I have 130 subs. I've got close to 600 views on two of my videos, and a couple other videos are north of 100 and north of 200. So that's really, really good. My analytics are doing well, but I'd like to grow more. So again, please like this video and subscribe if you have not done it already. I hope you enjoyed today's presentation. I will see you in 2 weeks' time on November the 20th or the 20th November at 12 noon Pacific, 3 p.m. on the Eastern Time Zone, and 8 p.m. in the United Kingdom. And as always, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.